Good morning and welcome back. I'm pleased to announce a great lineup of our first panel of speakers from, well, we just had a quick chat backstage and all used to be at Broadsoft. So it's a little bit of a reunion, but we're all at different places now. So we are going to go around and do a quick round of introductions. So Yann, maybe we could start with you. And when we do the introduction, could you give us a bit of insight into kind of what are the key enterprise trends you're seeing as well, along with an introduction to yourself?
Yes. Hi. Good morning, Dom, and good morning to all our friends in Spain. And I have to say, just to start, I have a special thought for you because we've all been hit by COVID, but I know it's been even harder in Spain. And not wanting to explain too much, but you know, in Spain, people are so warm and so close to each other, and that's maybe the reason where you hit the most, because you are so friendly people. So. I hope it's getting better, and just wanted to send you some my best wishes, for the coming months, where it's going to be like recovery time. So I'm introduction. Yes, Dom, I'm an ex-Broadsoft, but today I'm working at RingCentral. I'm in charge of the carrier business development at RingCentral. RingCentral is one of the leader in the UCaaS space. We are pure cloud players. So going back to what we've seen on the market since COVID, and I would be like starting what we've seen a lot of Zoom, a lot of Teams. That's really what the reality. And I think if you look at the keynote from Dom, that's really what happened. And I think very humbly, I said that what we see is like the benefit of a freemium model. When you get into a pandemic and you get all these corporations which are getting in a panic mode and say they had to, having their employee work from home, and the easiest way is either to use a tool that you didn't use before but you had on your PC, which was Teams, or look at the the popular freemium of the time, which was Zoom. So let's have an introduction. But on us, definitely what we've seen, and there are a couple of trends we see on our user base, and as a pure cloud player, RingCentral, we apply a lot of analytics, so we follow carefully the usage of our users. And the couple of trends we've seen. First is the explosion of the use of a soft client, and that's kind of logical, where people, starting to work from home and they left the IP phone at the office. But that's the first thing. The explosion of the use of the mobile client, and we've seen that. Actually, it's interesting because they were locked down. It was really like the soft client that people were using. Then the lockdown has eased a little bit, but people started to have this concept of working from anywhere. So they were using more and more, at least on your user, or the mobile clients, and they could do like the video, the chat, and everything from it. And the third, and I will stop that and let my ex-colleague take over. But the first big trend we saw, and we monitor that week after week during the whole pandemics, is the rise of video communication. It was, as to say, we had this possibility, but at the beginning of the pandemic, video was not like the main way to interact, but we've seen taking over week after week. So that's the main trend on our side, though.
Fantastic. Javier, from a Cisco perspective, what did you see in the market over the last few months as well?
Yeah, hello. So I'm Javier Munoz. I'm working in Cisco, Spain. I'm part of the service provider collaboration team. And yeah, basically, the major trend that we see right now in the market is the redefinition of how the workplace should be in the future, right? So we've seen how the companies have been surviving during the crisis, right? So they were choosing tools that allow them just to restore their operations quickly, right? And maybe taking, as Yann was saying, freemium solutions, right? But now we see that now is the time to reflect and to think if those are the tools that you need really to cope with the future. Because what we believe is that the future is a continuous change. It will be always changing. So it's not that we will be able to define how much people will be working remote, how much people will be working in the office. So this is going to be constantly balancing from one side to the other. So at the end of the day, the future means a hybrid workspace in which all the people can work together independently of where they are, and they can participate being a first-class participant. So it means that you no longer have to be like a second-class participant if you are remote, right? So this means that you can have the same features, the same functionality, the same interactions, or even richer when you are remote. So what this means is now that the companies, when they move from this survive to the new normal, or the continuously changing normal, they also need to redesign the workforce and the workplace. And they also need to invest in this. And I think this is quite important that they find the budgets to invest into that. And sometimes when you, for instance, when you redesign your workplace, maybe you think that you don't need so much floor anymore because some people will be remote. So maybe you can move part of the facilities budget into now the technology budget, right? And then on top of that, you need also to define the resilience. Up until now, the resilience was more to do with having redundant systems to be able to continue with your applications and with your data, and everything is redundant. But now resilience also needs to focus in the workforce and in the workplace. So actually you need to redesign all of that in order to be resilient to whatever might come. Not only for the pandemic that we have suffered, but there are some of the other events that might happen in the future, like natural disasters or politics instabilities. So a lot of things could come our way, and now the companies realize that if they are not able to or prepared to deal with that, they will have massive impacts as they have with the COVID.
100%. We see that resiliency becoming more and more important as businesses have to work out how communication is going to help them in the future. So Mike, can you give us a quick intro to yourself and your company, and take us through what you've seen as well?
Okay, thanks, Tom. So I'm Mike Wilkinson. I look after the UC product portfolio at Metaswitch. For those of you who are not familiar with Metaswitch, we're a UC vendor. We also produce a range of other telco products in the mobile core network environment. And in July of this year, we were acquired by Microsoft. So part of my role these days is on the UC side to work quite closely with the Teams group. So from my perspective, I guess looking back over the pandemic, which is obviously still ongoing, at the time I was in a mid-market company on the executive committee, and we were hit with this, and we had something like 300 engineers in the office, which created a sort of new category of UC user, which I would call not the home worker, but the displaced worker. So, overnight, literally in the space of 3 days, we had to move hundreds of people from a fairly managed situation to something which we just didn't know whether or not it would work. And, with the great, I guess the saving grace for the business was Teams, which was available to us. Immediately we switched it on, and people started to learn how to work in a virtual environment. And I think, some of the things that I've seen come out of that as a result, there's some very specific things, such as, in the video meeting environment, you start to have I guess enhanced capabilities which people start to learn how to use. So simple things like raising of a hand within Teams, right? To actually say, I want to say something. So, you get people getting drowned out, and I've actually seen now protocols within the business where people will raise hands and say, no, I want to say something. Then you've got other subtleties which have been built on things like Teams, which is together mode, which enhances the environment that people are working within. So you can have a sort of lecture theatre capability and so on. And some of the other things which has happened during the pandemic across multiple platforms is improvements in audio, not only just shipping out better quality headsets to everybody, which happened, but then noise suppression. I have a personal situation. Like every Thursday morning when I'm on calls, one of my neighbors has a gardener who turns up with his Deal power tools and drowns me out on conference calls. And now with the enhanced audio settings, that's improved significantly. So I think the good thing is that I take out of that is that people have learned how to use video meetings very effectively. Okay, and that will come back into the workplace as things settle down during next year. And there's been this subtle change in terms of knowing how to use these types of capabilities. And the one which I'm fascinated in is when we really get back into the office next year is how we deal with what I would call asymmetric meetings. So right now we're in a symmetric meeting. Everybody is on the same video call. But once you get 5 or 6 people back in a meeting room, then do you start to have, there's the guy on the video call in the corner, we can kind of ignore him. Or will it actually start that, because everybody's been at home for so long doing this, we'll start to mentally manage meetings better. And I think the technology has improved significantly as well. So you'll actually see more productivity in the workplace environment.
I think that's always the challenge with video, is it is asynchronous, so it's one-to-one. And yes, you might, like this call, we have 4 people on here, but you can't start a side conversation. And when you're talking around a meeting environment, how does that work in the future? How do you manage that? Share those kind of ideas that sort of spin off from there. I think that's going to be a big challenge for the industry, is how do we get these hybrid meetings to work in the future? Maybe looking at this from other technologies as well. So we talked around some of the trends coming through. What other technologies are we seeing kind of enable this? Mike, you touched on a couple there in terms of improvement, but maybe we'd focus on contact center. Are we seeing any kind of emergencies there and new ways that people are communicating? Javier, have you got any viewpoints on the technologies that are being brought in to enable some of this?
Yeah, and I think one of the major technology has to do with having in-person-like interactions, right? So I think in Rich's keynote before, they were talking about the minimum human interactions, right? So basically what this means is that we need to be close to the other people, to the people we are talking, right? So of course we cannot be in person, but the experience should be as in person as possible, right? And so this means having really good, of course, bandwidth. I mean, we cannot have cuts in the communication or buffering, right? Then also, but it also means having a high video quality and a really good voice and noise suppression, right? Because the closer, the better the image, the better the sound, the closer you feel to the other people, right? And this has very, very important consequences also, because working remote is increasing the fatigue of the employees. It is not the same working or having a meeting 1 hour in person than having a meeting 1 hour in teleconference, right? So typically people get tired earlier, right? So for that, we need really hardware that is optimized for that. So I believe that the PC is maybe not enough in these situations to really think about established remote work, right? So there are some hardware optimized devices that we need to put in place. And then we need to have a platform, right, that is fully integrated, right? That integrates not only the services in terms of the calling, meeting, and messaging, but also the devices are also integrated inside the processes of the enterprise. So I think it's another key technology, right? The one that focusing the platforms that focus on integration and also flexibility in terms of both reusing your current investments, right? Because if you have already some investments at your company in terms of these video devices that you have, you want to be able to integrate them, and also flexible to include new technologies, right? And then finally, I think the technology that we really need to get into our experiences has to do with the security, right? So we need secure communications. We have seen an increase of 600% of security breaches in all these communications. We've seen a lot of examples in which people was able to hack into the meetings, right? So we really need to have an end-to-end security that it secures not only the data, right, but we have encryption and the access control, right? So you decide who is the people in your meeting and can access or not, and it also has to do with data privacy. So it has to do on how your data is treated and to make sure that data doesn't go to places where you don't want to go, right? So it means also not providing or that the platform doesn't outsource to third parties like the transcription of the meetings, right? If you do the transcription with a third party, then your data is going somewhere else, right? And then you cannot ensure the compliancy of the data. So.
No, that makes sense. Yann, you raise your
yeah, raise my just like a, no. I just wanted to bounce back on some of Mike and Javier's comments. First, on Mike's, very important when you say the change in behaviors during the pandemic, and I think another way to see that is the pandemic has been like a huge first training session for a lot of people. A lot of people which had access to these new tools and actually the adoption was not very high, and they were forced to get into this new technology. And going back to the normal or to the what would be the new normal, I think these skills will remain. So we'll see like also or on the long trend, you know, a change in behaviors of the end users, and what Javier says about, you know, like this company wanted to sell things via WhatsApp. Actually, we've seen that a lot in RingCentral. We had, you know, we're talking about the contact center. We have a contact center which is for digital channels. So basically how the brand interact with their customers, if they're typically on WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and you know, on emails, all these digital channels. And we see a huge adoption of these contact centers, and we saw that because in a lot of cases the agent of a small contact center, which was probably voice, having to work from home, you know, maybe didn't have the environment, either the bandwidth or the nice hardware that Javier was talking about. So they had to adapt their business and shift the communication they had with the customer to digital channels. So that we've seen a huge increase, and we believe that will remain. I think that's just accelerating like a process that's making like on the contact center, you know, like the shift from purely voice interaction to more like a digital interaction.
No, that makes sense. And on those points of hardware, I can remember speaking to a vendor. I can't remember exactly. I think it might have been someone from Cisco who was saying they had a new VP arrive, and they said to them, "What technology do you want? And you can have all the big boards and all these things." And they said, "No, I want what the average user has to really understand what that experience is and get that best understanding of what most people."
We've lost Dom.
Yeah, and that's, I guess it's a bandwidth issue.
We want. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm having a few bandwidth issues myself. Are we back? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know where I left off there, but Anyway, Mike, on to you. Any comments on that as well from technologies that you're seeing emerge as well, which are solving some of these enterprise conundrums?
Well, I guess just based on the last 30 seconds, probably having more SD-WAN type capability into home office type environments is probably well overdue. But aside from that, I think one of the things that's come out of the pandemic, and Yann identified this, is that I think we've all become digital natives now. And previously, I used to work in the healthcare industry, and you used to look at the types of people you were trying to contact, right? And typically in healthcare, the main customers, if you will, were between sort of 60 and 80. And the types of communication capabilities that you would get to call them would be phones and maybe SMS. Now, I think what's happened with the pandemic is we've become used as a population to using video meeting tools. Okay, and that's a great thing. So which means that you can start to build those into customer journeys going forward. So you're going to see a lot more within, say, the contact center space. So you'll have far more video meeting capability coming in as part of either service or sales customer journeys. I think on the audio side of things, the biggest fatigue element on a meeting is audio, right? So if you have to concentrate to listen to someone, then that significantly restricts your ability to stay on a conference call for periods of time. So having high definition codecs, having high quality audio equipment on calls is paramount, because you make workers more productive as a result. And I think the one that's kind of coming over the hill now, which will be introduced, because the rate of innovation has been huge. But the next thing, in my opinion, which will come to make meetings better, will be AI-based systems which are starting to monitor the participants that we're on now. So they'll be monitoring, one, your movement, your facial expressions, and the way in which you use your voice to start giving various different stats back to maybe me to say, are you receptive to what I'm saying? Are you not receptive to what I'm saying? Are you attentive at the moment? So you're going to see a lot more of that built into these meeting tools over time, which helps participants understand the dynamics of the meeting and whether or not it's being productive or not.
I think that could get very scary, that kind of insight into that. But I can see the benefits of it. But yeah, I'm not sure if I want someone looking at me and saying, you don't look like you're paying much attention.
Exactly. Well, I hope, Mike, you don't give these ideas to your friends at Microsoft.
Yeah. Interestingly, that technology is already in use in the contact center world. So today, there's voice inclination systems which will detect whether or not people are, let's just say, disguising the truth in terms of what they're saying.
I mean, that's a scary thought there, but I agree with the comment around people using video. There's a study that we saw came out about 4 or 5 years ago around how long it takes for a habit to build, and it's 66 days on average for a person to get a habit in, whether it be going for a run every day or something. And you think, how long have we been using videos? How many days have we been using video over the last year? Yeah. That habit's here to stay. I use video more than anything, I would say, in terms of applications, and I spend most of my time staring at myself, it seems, on a screen. But yeah, it's a new way of working, and I think this hybrid workforce is going to have to adapt to it. And I think those points that come through earlier that we spoke about are definitely key on that. So I think we talked a bit around technology, how that's all changing, how the enterprise is changing. In terms of the sales process, we've seen a load of different channel models emerging and online sales models emerging. How do we see these changing in the future? Do you think there's going to be a big shift in the way that people are buying these technologies? And really, what's this mean for the service provider and the channel how do those two define themselves as two different providers? Mike, could we start with you on that, please?
Okay. So, I think from my perspective, what I've seen out in the industry with Teams, for example, is that Teams has been phenomenally successful, right? So it's got, I think the latest public numbers were 115 million daily active users on Teams. And it's got significant penetration into the enterprise space now, well, business markets generally. And as a result of that, you're also seeing implementation of things like phone system that goes with it. But typically that sort of deployment has hybrid scenarios, and fairly frequently it has hybrid scenarios. So that'll either be a hybrid with a Cisco PBX system, a UCaaS system, etc. And where I see the channel opportunity in that is the integration of those types of solutions into the voice estate, because quite a lot of the traditional Microsoft channel is an IT channel, okay? And you haven't seen that many voice specialists appear. Now, there have been specific Teams voice specialists, and quite a few of them, ironically, have been acquired in the last 6 to 9 months. So Gamma, for example, bought one not so long ago. I think WaveNet bought one as well, via. So that's, you're seeing there's a significant opportunity there for that sort of voice expertise sitting within a hybrid Teams and third-party UCaaS stroke PBX systems appear. So from a telco perspective, yes, you can supply the circuits, the direct routing, and so on and so forth that goes with that. But it's that expertise to understand the existing estate, how you integrate that with new estate, and bring in peripheral systems like, say, contact center, and bring that into various different call flows that you want to put together. So that's sort of one end. Then you get to the other end, which is the linkage into the business management systems. So if you're in healthcare in primary, you'd be integrating into something like System 1, or if you're going into secondary healthcare, it will be into things like Allscripts or Epic. So how you then build workflows that exist within Teams today that is linking into those master vertical specific systems and then bringing it back down to the communications infrastructure. I think the channel that we work with on a communication side is very much towards the left-hand side, and then I think you'll see the IT channel doing more the right-hand side.
That's fascinating insight there, thank you. And do we see the same thing, Javier, of the changing role of a service provider in a channel moving forward?
Yeah, well, what we see, of course, is that maybe we think of small enterprises, which we could see there a movement to the online purchasing, online channel, right? But when you come to the mid or large enterprise, then the service provider needs to continue to using their channels, their direct channels, right? And typically, I think maybe taking what Mike was saying about having a sales channel that can sell both IT and voice, right? The traditional sales channels of the service providers are typically voice-oriented, right? So they have the challenge to evolve. They have the challenge to evolve the channels to be more IT-oriented, because at the end of the day, where the service provider differentiates in the market really is when they are able to provide a bundle solution, end-to-end solution that includes the connectivity, includes the mobile, includes all the collaboration tools, and sometimes the devices. So, first, yes, they need to evolve the channel to be able to handle this bundling of services that include IT and voice. I think, secondly, they need to evolve the channel so that they sell the concept of a trusted and secure service provider. I think it's very, very key that the solutions that offered by the service provider have the stamp or being really and truly trusted and secure services. And the third thing that they need to evolve the channel is in order to be able to have a flexible services that can scale up or down very, very quickly. I think typically one of the problems of the service providers is that the provisioning times are very, very long, right? So it was impossible for them to compete in the pandemic, and that's why they saw a high increase of Zoom, for instance, or online channel where you could have a freemium offering. As I said at the beginning, that was good for surviving during that time. But now when you have to think about the future, you have to think about your end-to-end solution you are providing to your customer in your workplace. And I think that's where the service provider has more chances to win, as long as they can meet with these 3 points, right? Bundling services, trusted offering, and flexible services in terms of scalability.
That's great. And yeah, and you've been growing, obviously, your channel, or RingCentral been growing their channel business over the last few years. How do you see the channel changing from your perspective?
No, but I agree exactly with what Javier just said. I think in RingCentral we're evaluating on the service provider, so we see more and more channel. Originally RingCentral started with more like a direct approach to the market. Yes, we have all this digital technology, very quick onboarding, easy to sell, easy to deploy, easy to use, kind of mantra. But we think that all this technology we've developed, we can share it with a service provider and making like a very strong combinations. So you saw a recent announcement with Vodafone, and it's typically the direction. I mean, we're very excited about that because this is typically where the direction of where the company wants to go, having a strategic partner, a service provider which has a huge user base, and we can bring them, as Javier said, we can bring this digitalization. We can help them to be extremely quick to the market, to deploy quickly. As I said, what we missed in the pandemic is like the freedom we had, and we have to give our kudos to Zoom. They were at the right place at the right moment. But as again, Mike and Javier said, going back to the normal company that were in the panic mode, they will think about more like long-term strategy, and most probably we believe they want to associate their traditional telco partner in that strategy.
I think that's a great point about being in the right place at the right time. We've seen a few companies doing that, of being very lucky to have built their services. I know Hopin, which is the platform we're using at the moment, was launched in November in 2019, and recently got valued at about $2 billion off their last funding round, which, considering they only raised $4 million in, I think it was February, and raised $150 million in October, it's been a pretty phenomenal success story. So I think them and Zoom, we've seen some really, really great winners emerging from this. So in terms of mergers and acquisitions, we've seen a few of those already. Obviously, Mike, Metaswitch have been part of that with Microsoft, and we saw the Slack deal closing with Salesforce over the last in the last week. Do we see more M&A activity happening in this market, and where do you think it's going to come from? Is it going to come from service providers consolidating to build scale, or do you think it's going to come from vendors acquiring different technologies, or do you think it will come from people going, we don't need to acquire, we're going to build our own services ourselves? I don't know who wants to start off on that. Maybe Javier, go.
Yeah, maybe I can start, because I mean, Cisco has a long history of acquiring the companies, right? We're talking that we all come from Broadsoft, and Cisco acquired Broadsoft, so that's how I joined Cisco, right? And typically the idea here is to really find out what are the really good and best in the market niche players, right? And including them and integrating them into your offering. So it's not just a matter of buying a company, like for instance Cisco recently bought Bubble Labs, which is an company that provides noise suppression with artificial intelligence technology, right? Like Mike was talking about the gardener, right? Or the vacuum machine, or an ambulance sirens, or people typing, right? So so it's not only acquiring the technology, but it's also integrating that in your platform, in your offering, right? And making sure that it complies with the standards of the services that you are providing. First, in terms of having a native experience, so that technology looks like a native experience, and second, making sure that technology complies with the security that you need to provide, right? Because the last thing that you want is to buy a new technology and having a hole in your security or data privacy. So yeah, in summary, yes, we see a lot of acquisitions, especially from our side. I think in Cisco, into the new technologies, niche players that are really cracking the market.
Yeah. Yann, do you see that as well from a RingCentral perspective? You've made a few acquisitions over the year, but you also had some very strong partnerships as well, instead of kind of traditional acquisition.
Yeah, so we had a different approach. Instead of, I mean, there is no right or wrong. And for instance, what the Enrich Group is doing, I think is right on, you know, on their segment, their market. I think they just got it, and I guess it would be successful. On the RingCentral, we had a different approach. Instead of buying, we trying to prefer a strategic partnership. And we had one with Avaya, then we did with Alcatel-Lucent and Atos, Unified, you know, the Unified brand in Germany. And now we've got Vodafone. We have AT&T and Vodafone as really strategic partner on the carrier side. Our views is, instead of, you know, acquiring a company maybe for to give us access to a market, we prefer to have a strategic partnership. So having access to the user base of these partners, but maybe it's a little bit less costly. So that's what we personally on the market. Yes, we saw there would be like further consolidation, and I think it's no secret that a lot of the UC player are on the market, and no, the question is you know, who's going to be the next to be acquired. I think Metaswitch was one example. You know, it's they had some technology that Microsoft wanted. They sold it. Congratulations to them. But there are other players that could be acquired by, you know, this big cloud. You call it like the hyperscalers. So I think we'll continue to see that.
Yeah, and it's from our perspective at Cavell, we're doing a lot of work at the moment with M&A and acquisitions, both from a private equity point of view, where companies are looking at raising funding to grow and to enter new markets, buy new providers, or from an acquisition point of view, bringing in capabilities as well. Mike, where do you see this from your perspective?
So I think, yeah, if you take a step back and look at the Microsoft acquisition of Metaswitch, and Affirmed as well, which happened a little bit before that. Yeah, that was very much, as Yann intimated, a technology play from Microsoft, who sees significant opportunity in, say, the 5G market, and also using some of that technology within other parts of the business like Teams and so on. So I think if you then sort of take a step back and say, okay, well, what's happening in acquisitions? And clearly, the likes of private equity and other players are doing roll-ups, okay, to basically improve economies of scale and that sort of thing. Then you've got, as I mentioned earlier, you've got some specific acquisitions around near-term market opportunities. So you're seeing some of these specialists that have built capability around Teams being hoovered up very quickly, because there's huge market demand for that sort of thing right now. Okay, so having that in your scope of capability, especially when there is a lack of skills out there. Okay, so there's, it's a supply-demand thing. If it is going to take you 6 months to train up a whole new department to get those capabilities in-house, whilst you can go and buy someone for a few million, that's what's happened. Okay, and you're seeing players that have got significant footprint in the UCaaS market covering that option going forward. Now, then you get into the sort of longer term direction of making acquisitions, and I think that's where there's the guys that are going to do more integration in the sort of northbound side of things, having those skill sets going towards the various different markets. The one I'm familiar with on a first-hand basis is the healthcare market, right? So specialists that are dealing with healthcare communication solutions. There's a company called, I think it's Accuvix, which in the space of a week put in video communications to, I think it was 3,500 primary practices in the UK. Okay, so those sorts of skills are going to be more and more valuable going forward. And it's not just the technology skills, it's understanding how those businesses operate, right? So do you understand how a primary healthcare practice works, all the compliance issues that they're running into? And then, the average comm service provider will not have those skills. So bringing that in-house from a third party who's got that is going to be important. And then from a strategic technology perspective, I think, the big area right now is obviously 5G capability, not just in terms of the networking, but all the use case stuff that's going to sit behind it, which is there's going to be a huge amount of automation that sits with that. So for example, if you look at private 5G or private LTE, then a lot of that is being targeted towards things like manufacturing, factory of the future, mining industry, ports authorities, that sort of thing, where you're looking at management of those estates in a very simple manner with basically private infrastructure.
That's great. I think that there's a whole other conversation that we could have on mobile and 5G and how that all plays in the future. But unfortunately, we've run out of time today on our panel. But I'd like to say thank you to all our panelists, and I know we're going to be hearing from you all, or from all your companies throughout the rest of today. But thank you all for taking part in this, and look forward to seeing you all hopefully in the new year.
Okay.
Thank you, Dom.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.